So I want to introduce to you none other than Sundance Robson, who is going to lead us.
Hey, I'm warrior. Hey, I'm
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Amy, for writing this book. Wow. That's why I'm standing here right now. She wrote a book about her husband, and it's created a pathway for me to stand here and acknowledge exactly where we are. I was wondering when the word would come in, but what it was that I would say to this room, how it would be that I would acknowledge this room, because for me, acknowledgement is something that's really important. And the book of being, entitled The Ultimate Coach, I don't know if I could get through it without that piece really standing out. And in fact, it indirectly served me in my culture. Because one of the things that we do as Indigenous people is we acknowledge the land. We acknowledge the land. And so I acknowledge the Pima people. I acknowledge the Maricopa people. Arishona is an Awatham word. Awatham people, they call the Pima people today. Arishona means the place where there are a lot of little rivers. And I can see that there's also a lot of little rivers that have come here with some great lakes today too. And we're sitting in the ocean. And so I want to welcome you all to ceremony. I wondered, what could I say? What could I say that would cover all the bases? I'm going to cover my base. I want to welcome you to ceremony. I'm going to make a request, and that request is that everybody stand up. If you have been to an ultimate experience, thank you for coming. Thank you for attending. Because it's through these people are helped and served. If this is your first ultimate experience, will you please stay standing, and will everyone please sit down? If this is your first ultimate experience, will you please stay standing? Look at this. Wow. Wow. Look at that. This is the room. Wow, that's impressive. It's impressive. And you can sit down. When I've come to events in my life, as someone that has struggled with addiction and is in recovery, there were a lot of years when I would show up to events, seminars, nothing like this, but I would show up, I would be on fumes. It would be really difficult for me to reach out. In fact, I felt isolated even just in my own chair. And I would wonder, I wish they would do something to try to consolidate the energy in the room. What will unify it? What will bring the person that's sitting next to me closer to me? What will bring the room, what will create an intimacy in here? So that when we go through this whole weekend, we roll together like a unit. We roll together like a tribe. We roll together in this way that's felt. Because you are all the most important people in this room. That's what this is about. It's about you. And so, if there's anybody here that's showing up on fumes or feels like they need support in a way, or that they're kind of at the tipping point, they want to break through, if you care to, I'd invite you to raise your hand. Okay. I'm going to take it one step further. If you would care to, would you stand? Now, for the people that are standing, I'm going to invite the people that are now seated to put your focus on them in a loving way. And if you're okay with physical touch, and by physical touch I mean someone putting their hand on your shoulder. If you are okay with that, and if you are someone that's standing, would you please raise your hand? For the people that are seated within the vicinity of this, would you please apply a hand to the shoulder? What I'm now going to do is I'm going to sing into the field of the room. As people are standing, I'm going to sing, and we're going to consolidate the energy in here. We're going to be like Frank Foolscrow, like what Frank Foolscrow said. We're going to be like hollow bones, like an empty vessel. We are going to use who we are being to shift some of that energy in people's way. Get everyone to return to their seats. So I have 30 seconds left. There's someone else that's about to come on after me by the name of Stephen McGee. I'm not here to introduce him or anything, but I want to give this to Stephen. If he's here. I'm not trying to wreck the mystique, but I want to give this to you. As you reset your life, I want to give you something of sentimental value that's traveled all around the world with me. who was given to me by a rattle maker, an indigenous rattle maker in Saskatchewan. It's traveled with us and in our community. This means a lot to us. And indeed, there's a spirit that inhabits this rattle. I'm giving this to you. Tansei Buzu, I'm Sundance Robson, and if you're watching this, it's because we've been talking about the possibility of creating white feather at your firm. What I want to do is I want to offer you a window into something that you can expect from white feather. While this isn't a live presentation and this is a pre-recorded film, it's going to give you an idea of the content that I'm going to be speaking about at your corporate event. And it'll also give you a better perspective of who I am, Sundance. And this will help you make an informed decision if this is something that you want to bring into your corporate firm or into your government corporation or department and present truth and reconciliation from a different angle, an angle from an intergenerational survivor, while also providing insight into how we can apply this in our day-to-day lives, in business and in the corporate structure. So as I do my due diligence, the first thing I want to do is offer you an opportunity to not watch this. Yeah, that's exactly what I just said. I want to give you the opportunity to decide to not watch this now. And why I want to do that is because I'm going to share a story about my life as a child and some of the things that occurred growing up as an intergenerational trauma survivor. My father attended Brandon Residential School, and when he was in residential school, he ran a lot. That was something that I found for myself would become this ongoing theme in my life until I found a way to address it. I'm going to get into all that later. What I'm here to do right now is to, in essence, issue a trigger warning. We've all been through different lanes in our life. We've all had different experiences in our life, and the way that we respond to one person's experience might not be the way that we respond to another's experience, just based on who we are and how we were raised. And so the trigger warning that I'm issuing is around mental, emotional, spiritual, and sexual abuse. Where I don't go into great detail on some of these things, I do touch on the occurrences that occurred in my life as a child, and I tell the story of where something can happen in your life just for a short period of time, and it can then go on to impact you for the rest of your life. And indeed, when this occurred in my life, I forgot it. I had forgotten it when we were taken into a series of shelters, the Isabel Johnson shelter, the Transition House, Sophia House. By the time that we had gone through those shelters and my dad was arrested, I had totally forgotten about the abuse that occurred earlier on in my life. And in fact, that abuse never actually showed up till much later in life when I was sitting in a treatment center in Pine Lodge after I had done an exercise. This is why I'm offering the opportunity to not watch this. This is totally at your discretion. And why am I doing this? Because it helps give insight into what people can experience when they're working with, spending time with, coaching, or leading an intergenerational trauma survivor. If you know someone that is Indigenous, they come from two avenues of life, usually someone that is an intergenerational trauma survivor or someone that has attended Indian residential school. You might come from a colonial history or a settler history. That is a different path. It wasn't the path that the Indigenous people in Canada followed. And yet we all have ancestral pain that we carry in our lives. So White Feather is meant to address both the Indigenous and non-Indigenous side of life because we all carry ancestral pain. And we want to be able to communicate cross-culturally with each other. And the way that we can do that is by listening more deeply to where the person is coming from internally. That can help us be more productive in the way that we're leading. So there's a quote that I want to share, and it's from Batman. "The night is always darkest before the dawn." And in this story, we're going to start at the darkest point. And then we're going to gradually move into the awareness of the understandings that came into my life that helped me integrate and understand so I could ultimately heal from the pain of the past. So we'll begin now. I sat in treatment at Pine Lodge in the auditorium alone, staring at this mural on the chalkboard. People would say, "We don't know who drew that mural on the chalkboard, but it's always been there." I realized I still had a few more weeks to go before I completed treatment. And since I'm here, I may as well do some work. And besides, It might help the time go by a little bit quicker. For the first time in a week and a half since checking myself into treatment, I opened my books and read the question staring back at me. List all of the things you are powerless over in your life. I remember thinking to myself, what the fuck is this? Write down all of the things that I'm powerless over? I need to simplify this. So in other words, make a list of all the things that piss me off. After I said that to myself, I realized I had the first one. I am powerless over relationships. And then I had another one. I'm powerless over death. And again, I'm powerless over sex. And more, I'm powerless over God and religion. I'm powerless over violence. I'm powerless over addiction. I even wrote down I'm powerless over demonic possession. Because after all, I couldn't get through a day in life without using drugs or alcohol. Something has to be in control of me. On and on, deeper into the abyss of scars, remembering all of the things I hadn't forgotten. Pages of it. Until nothing. A nothing I hadn't yet experienced. Formless. Void. Still. Uninterrupted. Then slowly, out of nothing, arose something. From a dim hue taking form. A child sitting on a mattress in front of a TV. It was as if, from my mind's eye, I was looking down into a living room. Like vines of poison, slow as they grow around me to my heart and throat, like a baptism into a strange, hell-filled darkness. What is this? I asked myself. I leaned forward, pressing my hands into my eyes in hopes some part of me would wake up. And the next series of thoughts came. It's me. There's a child on the mattress. And it's me. It was like vines were wrapping and tightening around me, an ever-growing feeling of sickness, dark and disturbed. And the next set of thoughts came in. I'm being brainwashed to porn. My father is using porn to try to convince me that this is why my mom isn't here and she isn't coming to get me. It was as if the ambient hue faded back into the emptiness. Here I am, again, this trance that I would so often fall into throughout my life. I wondered, was it here, in moments like this, that I found this forever gray state of being? Again, it all fades back in, this time pounding on the door, with each hit from the other side getting louder. Bang, bang, bang. Followed by a guy yelling, "Open the door, Dennis. We don't want the kids. We only want you." The child in me is shocked into waking with eyes wide open. Disorientated, and as I gasp for breath, I raise myself up off the mattress. My father springs up off the couch across from me and yells out this loud sound I've never heard before. The living room was dark, only lit by the street light in the front yard. It was freaky. I watched him run into the kitchen with a look of terror on his face. He picked up the old rotary phone and dialed 911. This was hell, and we were living in it. Even beyond what I heard them yell, I was consumed with, "They're going to kill us." I sprung up off the mattress, and just like slow motion or trying to run in a dream, I ran down the hallway into the bathroom and cracked open the window. The cold night air seeping in. I was too little to reach up and get out the window, so I just stood there in the bathtub. I could hear constant pounding and voices muddled in with the unforgettable sound of the exhaust pipe on the vehicle they were in. The pounding stopped, no voices, and just the sound of that exhaust pipe gurgling for about a minute, like a meditation in hell. One of the guys piped up, "Let's just go." I could hear another voice mumble something, and then silence followed by the sound of 2 car doors shutting as the car peeled off. The ambient hue fades back into the black emptiness with the thought, I'm alone. The thought births a rising of more thought-created feelings that have so often accompanied my journey in life thus far. Anger, my friend, disdain, my distance, and hatred, my isolation. A personal, unholy trinity, the ones that have kept me safe along this path of self-betrayal since then. Is this what my father learned in residential school? The guys pounding on the door. Is this what they learned in residential school? And the church and Canadian government, is this what you were teaching in the residential schools? Is this what you did to my ancestors? And was it now my turn to receive the teaching? I knew this lost memory was part of me, and I felt haunted by it, and hardened by the thought and feeling that my father died of a heroin overdose 6 years ago in 1999. That image of him lying in the coffin burnt into my soul. I always remembered him in a t-shirt and vest with his hair braided, but he looked like his head had been shaved a few weeks ago, and his hair reminded me of the picture I saw of him when he played hockey in residential school. I can't take this up with him now. I can't talk to him about what happened. There's no one to call. It's just me. I felt exhausted, and it was getting late. I needed to go to bed. I knew tomorrow morning I would sit in group and recount what came back into my awareness by sharing with my group all the things that I was powerless over. I would share my experience for the first time about a life once forgotten to a group of recovering addicts and my drug counselor.
Many people have said over the years that I've been involved in the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, why can't you just get over it and move on? And my answer has always been, why can't you always remember this? Because this is about memorializing those people who have been victims of a great wrong. Why don't you tell the United States to get over 9/11? Why don't you tell this country to get over all of the veterans who died in the Second World War instead of honoring them once a year? Why don't you tell your families to stop thinking about all of your ancestors who died? Why don't you turn down and burn down all of those headstones that you put up for all of your friends and relatives over the years? It's because it's important for us to remember. We learn from it. And until people show that they have learned from this, we will never forget. And we should never forget, even once they have learned from it, because this is a part of who we are. It's not just a part of who we are as survivors and children of survivors and relatives of survivors, but it's part of who we are as a nation. And this nation must never forget what it once did to its most vulnerable people.
What do you think I built of stone? Come on and shoot me with all these things across.
I remember sitting in treatment when the group came to an end after I just shared what I shared and what I experienced in the auditorium. And a lot of things seemed to happen at the end that I don't remember so well. But I remember the counselor was looking at me. And I think just when she was looking at me, she saw that I could use a break. And so she dismissed us and everyone headed out back for a cigarette. But as I was walking out the back door of Pine Lodge, I took a few steps down the stairs and my eye made contact immediately with this yellow flower. And when I looked at it, it was like boom. It was like the sun was contained in that little flower. And when I looked up to the sky, I opened my eyes and it hit the sun. And I was immediately taken back to this moment when I was a little kid walking home from St. Josephat School. There's a path that ran from the school in between two houses, and the house that you saw in the video was my house that I lived in. And I remember walking home on that path when I was a little kid in that moment, looking up at the sun, seeing the row of trees and the houses. And it was like we were in this dome structure, Earth. And I remember inquiring into the nature of reality in that moment when I was a little kid, saying, what is all of this? What is this thing? There's like a fireball in the sky. And then I was brought back to the moment in Pine Lodge. And in that moment, when I was looking up at the sun, sort of being carried away in this, I realized I had just spent that whole period of time looking down, and that this would be the first time in my life when I walked, I looked up and at people. I would begin to encounter life. One of the things for me when I think about that moment when I was a kid, and as I've thought about it as an adult, was that was really when the veil began to close for me, where there was a whole lot of time that passed where I didn't really remember anything. In fact, I didn't remember it post shelter. So after we had gone through shelters, I had no recollection or no memory in my mind about those instances and occurrences of me as a child inquiring into the nature of reality. I was an angry kid to the point that my mom had me see child psychologists and took me to different people that were in the holistic arts in Regina to try to understand why my son is suicidal. I was at 11 years old. And it still parallels like that today. That's something that you can observe on Indian reserves is young children being suicidal. What occurred in my life that had me in a place of hopelessness? What could have changed so much from that child that innocently looked up to the sun and inquired into the nature of reality, almost feeling hinted by the creator that there's something more here? Well, it was everything that I shared in that video. And these moments in our life when we wake up to something else that's inside of us, or whenever that something else wakes up unto us, it starts to make sense. The story starts to unravel. And when I say the story starts to unravel, I mean the story about who I thought I was in the first place prior to that experience walking home on the path.
Why? 'Cause I don't wanna be alone. 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 'Cause I don't wanna be al
At first, there was nothing, and then there was something, and that something was nothing. The word Anishinaabe translates to the people from whence were lowered, the good humans, meaning those who are on the right road or path given to them by Creator Manitou or Manitou. Manitou is the great essence of all things, past, present, and future. That great essence of all things, for the very first time, heard a sound. And that sound sounded like two rocks coming together, letting off a deep, thundering bang. That sound begat a vision. And before Manitou was a set of beautiful things, this great essence and being, Manitou, saw everything. And most importantly, Manitou saw you. Manitou saw you now and today in the presence of the Spirit as a gift. And this is the most amazing piece of it. Creation is a gift. And life is the opportunity to live that gift. And so Manitou began to create with that gift because we can create with a gift. I went and grabbed this rattle. It looks like just a rattle. Through the Anishinaabe creation story, this is more than just a rattle. This is the Spirit disguised as the rattle. Because in everything that we create, so too do we create with the Spirit that's infused in us and infused in everything that we work with. For me, White Feather and the creation of White Feather was a way for me to actually unearth and continue doing the deeper work on myself so I could be this way with people. There was a deep liberation in the creation of White Feather because I put pen to the paper and actually looked at what it was that I hadn't unearthed for many years. And although the process of creating White Feather is indeed accessing the deepest wound that I've ever experienced in my life, there's a massive amount of equally balanced liberation of freedom that comes by doing this work, by spending time in understanding what was going on with me ancestrally and how that related to my day-to-day relationships with people that I carry out in the world. There was an elder who was sitting with a boy, a youth, and that youth came to the elder, and the youth was disturbed, wondering, who am I? What is my life? And the elder looked at the boy and he said, do you have a dream? And the youth looked back at the elder and said, no, I don't. And the elder looked back at the boy. Well, then that's your problem. And there's two things in there. That's your problem that you don't have a dream. Go within and create that dream. Don't spend a bunch of time trying to look for it. Go within and create, like the story of Manitou, like the Anishinaabe story. Go within and create. And the other piece is that the reason you feel stuck in life is because you're not operating from a dream. You're not operating from that place that springs forth of inspiration, that moves into purpose, that moves us into action, that moves us through life. To be in spirit is to be inspired, and to be inspired is to be in spirit. Here's something that I just wasn't aware of growing up. When we don't receive our linear teachings, we move into horizontal survival mode. Those linear teachings that we get from elders, those linear teachings that we get from being in ceremony, those stories carry a life. They carry a spirit. In fact, when we hear stories that are told orally that have been handed down through the generations, they carry a living essence. It's like they're a living being. And when we tell stories, people come to life. There's a certain type of transmission that's picked up. And this isn't something that I'm trying to be vague about. It's that when we get in the perimeter of someone, when they've experienced a deep truth that's been changing, there's a certain type of conviction that comes through them. They've actually seen the story work in their life. And because they've seen the story work in their life, it's integrated. But that doesn't happen if we don't receive our linear teachings. Because when problems arise, when relationships turn into discord, we move into horizontal survival mode because it becomes very difficult to know how to function. And I relate this to my life. There was just a few instances in my life when I was a child where something highly impactful occurred, like you heard in the video. And that would go on to haunt me for the better part of my life. Even when I think about it now, it doesn't seem like it was too long ago when I was struggling deeply. An overwhelming struggle, almost unaware of how to get out of it. And I wanted to get out of it, but really, I needed to get into me. I needed to get inside of Sundance to understand what it was that was being created inside of me. And what was being created inside of me was the narrative that I learned through survival. When people came to get my dad in the middle of the night, I immediately went into survival mode. Can you imagine the type of breathing that sets into a child as soon as they wake up in the middle of the night and there's people there to kill his father? The breathing that sets in is something that makes the child startled. Then second of all, I wanted to hide. I never wanted to be visible. And it's so interesting because throughout my entire life, visibility has been a massive struggle for me. This takes me into another story. My given name's Justin James Sundance Robson. Robson's my last name. When I grew up, I always grew up to the sound of Sundance. I never knew Justin. My parents always called me Sundance. And so the first day of kindergarten, I go into school and I look at my little kindergarten box. I don't see the name Sundance. So what occurred was a few days prior to the first day of kindergarten, we went into orientation for what class would be like for the first day. And I remember going to my kindergarten box and seeing the name Sundance written on it. When I went into kindergarten for the first day and it was time for me to go to my box, I didn't see my name Sundance. There was another name written on it. The name was Justin, but I didn't know that. And so where I saw all of these kids going to their boxes and I thought that I knew where my box was, I didn't know where to go. I was totally disorientated in that moment because I lost my identity. Who I thought I was wasn't that anymore. And what I would come to find out just a few years ago was the excuse that the school board gave my parents was that the name Sundance is just going to be too hard for him to spell. I knew as a child something was up. I remember the whole thing being strange. That was my first time as a child ever experiencing an identity crisis. I didn't know what it meant to be Indian, but I knew for the rest of my life that I was going to do whatever I could to hide the fact that I was. Create this video about land acknowledgements because I've over the years accumulating some stories around land acknowledgement. This is become mainstream now in our culture in Canada and in Treaty 4 is that before we do corporate events or large gatherings, there's land acknowledgements. And so I've had the opportunity and invitations to come out and give land acknowledgements at corporations private board meetings in various settings. I've learned a few things and I've had the opportunity to see some things over the years. And I want to share these with you because this isn't going to be what you would find as like a typical talk on land acknowledgements. What I'm going to do is I'm going to offer you a different perspective on it. And I think you're going to find this massively insightful. And so this is why I'm sharing it. This is specifically for leaders. This is going to directly relate to how you're running teams and also being able to spot inspiration within team leadership. And this all comes back to land acknowledgements. So one of the first opportunities that I had to do a land acknowledgement was at a private school here in Treaty 4. They wanted me to come out and sing. When I was on the phone with one of the directors of the school, they were telling me that right now in the board, there was a lot of dysfunction. And there was a lot of dysfunction between the parents and the administrators and the people that were running the school. So when town hall meetings would happen, with dysfunction would erupt. And so I'm being called out to this place to go and sing. And they were saying, you can do the land acknowledgement, but we usually have someone that is non-Indigenous do the land acknowledgement. And I said, okay, great. I'll be there. I'll sing a song that I have and call the container forward for this town hall meeting. And so as I'm sitting there waiting to sing and people are beginning to file in and I'm just sort of sitting there with my setup, I've got my mic, I got my drum, and it doesn't even take but a few minutes before people start arguing. I can hear clatter of people and tension is arising because the format and the structure of this meeting, the people that were coming in to address it thought it was one way, while the administrators were going to conduct meeting a different way. So instead of people coming in and having a town hall meeting where they were addressing one person specifically, they would all be broken off into small little tables, and those tables would take their concerns to the person that was running that specific table. And so as this was announced, frustration only began to erupt. Now, there was a mic at the front of the room where one of the board members was speaking from, addressing the room. The parents were becoming immediately upset and really beginning to sort of shoot their arrows at the person at the mic. And I'm not here to talk about who was right or who was wrong. That wasn't at all what I was here to do. What was happening was there was a lot of tempers arising. So as they sort of just realized that they need to calm the room down and we need to proceed with the meeting, because arguing inevitably before we even start the meeting is going to even shorten the length of the time that we have to discuss things in the first place. So the board member introduces me without doing the land acknowledgement. And I said, from my chair, are you going to do the land acknowledgement? And they were very frustrated. They were very sped up because the room was animosity. They basically decided that they weren't going to do the land acknowledgement. So I said, because I had my own little mic there, I'm going to do the land acknowledgement. And when I got up, I looked at everybody. For me, I knew what land acknowledgement meant. It was the one thing that did not exist in the room. Can you guess what it is? One of the things that I shared with everybody in the room was I said, hey, I'm Sundance Robson, and I'm going to do the land acknowledgement, and then I'm going to do a song. But what I let them know was the reason that we do land acknowledgements is because Indigenous people are inseparable from land. Indigenous people acknowledge everything. We acknowledge the directions, we acknowledge the creator, we acknowledge the land, we acknowledge each other. We also confirm that by saying all my relations, because we're in relationship with everything. And one of the things that happened through colonialism was the separation from land. And so what we're doing is we're separating from identity. This is one of those things that seems to get lost in the plain reading of the land acknowledgements. It's this very mundane sort of reading that people read out, and people listen to the land acknowledgements pretty much the same way they listen to the seatbelt program at the beginning of a flight. I really wanted to key in and tune into the way people were listening to me. Ultimately, that would have an impact on how they listened to each other and how they spoke to each other. Because what we need right now is we need the possibility to create relationship. That's what we need. And we're going to do that through land acknowledgements. And everything that I just shared there about being acknowledging to the land, acknowledging the directions, acknowledging each other, acknowledging the creator, there's a reason that we do this. Because doing a land acknowledgement is the equivalent of saying, I love you. That has an impact in the room. That was the one thing that did not exist in the room in that moment. So did that land? Because as soon as we start saying, I love you, people can get really caught up in the woo-woo of it, right? What's the woo-woo of it? So I want to look at it from the place of Michael Jordan loves basketball. Kobe Bryant loves basketball. There's a deep sense of love in that. The way that they play, the way that they perform is like love. I've never met a leader in my life that didn't love what they did. And if they didn't love it, they weren't there for very much longer before they were creating something else and following a new pathway altogether. That's the thing about high performance. If you don't love what you do, if you don't love what you're tapped into, it's impossible to be a high performer because there's no purpose. There's no inspired action occurring. And so when we come to understand land development from a place of leadership and understanding, we're coming actually from a place of love. There was another instance when I was sitting down with a client and we were having a conversation about some of the things that were going on in his life. And so as we got to the end of the session, he just sort of sat there and sort of nodding his head. And there was something like I could tell there was something he wanted to say or something he wanted to ask. And he said, "What's with the land acknowledgement thing? I have my own views about that." And I thought, well, no, this is interesting. This is very interesting because throughout the session, I really acknowledged my client for who he was in this world and the work that he does with people and his whole customer base, who he is as a father and as a husband. I acknowledged him in these areas. And he had a really difficult time receiving the acknowledgement. I could see it. I could see that he had a difficult time receiving the acknowledgement because I could almost see that when I acknowledged him, it was like he was trying to shift the direction or shift the attention away from him and understanding that he is this person that is being acknowledged. And so what I thought to myself was so interesting that someone that can't receive an acknowledgement nor acknowledge themselves would be critical of the land acknowledgement. That was really interesting. And so one of the things that I shared with him was exactly what I shared before. And when I shared with him about what land acknowledgement really is and what it means, that there's actually like an understanding there. It's not just like something that we read, but that there's a deeper understanding to this whole piece. It shifted his whole perspective. Land acknowledgements came from somewhere. And if you're in corporate or if you're in leadership or if you're somewhere in Treaty 4, it comes down through the paper. It comes down from the office up above, and we're assigned to read it. If we have understanding with the person that's reading it, this makes our life a whole heck of a lot easier. And so this is what I do. I help create understanding by first working with the very beginning thing, acknowledgement, not even land acknowledgement, acknowledgement. Because if you can't acknowledge yourself, you're not going to be able to acknowledge your team. And if you can't acknowledge your team, the people that perform for you aren't going to perform as well as they can. It's amazing what type of influence you have as a leader when you are capable of being able to acknowledge yourself, because then you then become capable of being able to acknowledge the people around you.